So when I call, pick it up and
yeah. Okay, but
you need not shudder at what's coming.
But getting back to this large, so with all of these very dangerous and disturbing topics, I start to understand that you believe, and I think it's correct, that we can often get to hell through a road paved with good intentions.
Yeah,
I don't disagree with that.
And the converse is also true. You can have good effects of bad intentions, and that's and you shouldn't credit the good effects too highly there, right. Because like I think intentions matter for the most part. I mean, intentions are the operating system. So because like if you're iterating on your intentions, if you're error correcting,
right, and
hewing back to the outcomes you actually want, right? Those are the people we can collaborate with, when they're ethical. The people who are right by accident or producing good things by accident are.
But Sam, it's how we encode this that's so interesting to me. Like when we order veal, we just say the word veal. We don't think about what it is that we're causing to occur.
Yes. I want the 3-minute video before I eat the veal. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
Like very few of us do that. When I think about like how Debbie Wasserman,
but that's why I don't order veal. Right. That's a difference. At a certain point, too much information has a consequence. Right. Like I'm not comfortable with veal or foie gras. Right.
Yeah.
So it's like and it would matter. It should if you said, well, here's veal, but this is veal. This is pain-free veal. Right. This is veal that was, synthesized in a lab, no animals involved. The problem goes away. So that's the fact that you'd want there to be a difference there. You wouldn't, take the most extreme case. You wouldn't want to be the person who would pay more for the veal if you knew there was more suffering associated with it, right? We wouldn't want be the person for whom the suffering is part of the pleasure, right? That's that's clearly a place on the moral landscape you don't want to be, and you don't want to be associated with, right? So if that's at all unsavory, then there are many gradations of better than that, right? So
this goes back to my issue about orcas are either the best or worst species.
Right. Yeah. No, but I didn't mean to derail you there, but it matters. Like we need to unpack the mimetic complex and get at what's inside, and it matters if we fail to. If there's a lot inside and we're unaware of it,
sure,
that matters.
Okay.
How often are we just saying veal without realizing?
For example, I remember when Debbie Wasserman Schultz was being interviewed about superdelegates, and she said they're not superdelegates, they're unpledged delegates, and why do we have to have them? And I think she said something to the effect, and if I'm getting this wrong, I apologize. Something like, well, you wouldn't want the people who aren't regular party workers, just being able to take over the party or something like this. I was thinking like, oh, that's what we all think it is, that it's a primary, and that the people who are registered Democrats should figure out who they should support as a candidate. And her point was, well, we have to have a thumb on the scale, otherwise democracy might happen.
Right. Yeah.
And like that thing is how we encode the badness. We encode it by creating some different way of talking about it.
How we encode it, or we fail to encode it? How it becomes operable, or how?
Well, nobody's a bad person in their own mind most of the time.
Yeah,
So when I do bad things, I encode it differently. So we were just in a situation where we were waiting in a very long line of cars for an off-ramp, and our car, sort of zoomed ahead and then asked somebody's, understanding that we would cut in right towards the exit. Right. So, sort of high-fiving like, geez, we almost got caught in that really long line. Later in the day, somebody cuts in front of us, much less of a problem. It's like, can you believe that guy? And right. So this way in which we sort of see ourselves as the permanent, like, good guy protagonist, in the first case being savvy.
Yeah, but so don't you think living a good life is in large measure a matter of squeezing the delta between those two states of mind?
You think that that's true. And
I think that's why it was a leading question.
I know. Yeah. I know. But I think that it's actually much more tricky.
So let's take the antithesis. What if I told you that I thought it was a matter of getting broadening that gulf, right? So to be more extremely at odds with oneself, depending on what side of the table you're on. And those,
see, I think you would have been less likely to cut in line. Mm-hmm. But if you did cut in line, I wonder if you'd be less likely to notice it and talk about it the way I do. So I think that your morality and my morality differs slightly.
I don't think you're giving Nassim Taleb too much credit, and you're not giving me enough.
Oh, is that right?
So I am.
I see you as pretty consistent in a lot of ways.
Yeah, what I aspire to be is to cut in line the right amount.
Okay.
And to be appropriately non-judgmental when I see someone else cut in line the right amount.
That's very odd. I'm pretty close to that.
Yeah. I mean, so I don't have too many illusions about what it is to do it but what it is when somebody else does it. So I'm not as, and when I occasionally catch myself in that mismatch between, who I'm capable of being in one moment and how judgmental I am of somebody else in that same mode.
Noticing your own sort of issues makes you a better person if you can port them more generally. So in other words, if you say, look, I recognize that, I'm not the best around food or something, but
yeah,
I am very conscious in some other area, like being timely. Well, if you can recognize somebody else's failings as akin to your own in a different area and port that, that's a way in which, like, being in touch with your own hypocrisy, I think makes you a better person. And I worry about people who are trying to rid themselves of their hypocrisy rather than first noticing it and then sort of minimizing it so that it's less garish.
But to truly want to minimize it, you have to be in touch with it, right? So that's you run those. Those are two pieces of software you're running at the same time.
Well, I think it's more like I don't see any prospect for ridding myself of it. And other people say, "Oh, I caught some. I have to get rid of it." It's like it's an imagined state that they could. I can prove agree. More or less that you can't live without
it. Because you're not a unitary thing, right? Like
you aren't a unitary thing,
right?
And most of us, even though we know that, we still treat ourselves as unitary things, which is bizarre.
Yeah.
Well, you're in the mindfulness space.
So I work hard not to do that either.
Yeah, but I don't have an app and I don't do these practices, but I'm still very conscious of that fact that I'm not unitary.
Yeah. No, I mean that if you follow that a little bit further, that becomes very interesting because you're not. But that doesn't mean there's no norm you want to aspire to follow, right? Like you can be. There are phases of your mind you can prefer to others, and you can, and there's also something that happens when you cease to be taken in by your different selves and all these different modes, right? To the normal degree, then you can then there's a kind of freedom to navigate to a kind of a happier conversation.
But there is some way in which what you're talking about is that one of your parliament of selves is your meta self, which you're probably getting as close to identifying with unitarity as anything else.
Well, it's just the more
thing
the
that
more
supervises
you see
the subroutines, you would probably call Sam Harris.
Well, I would. It's more diaphanous than that. I mean, ultimately, it's just consciousness. I mean, the only thing that can supervise anything or be aware of anything, or experience anything, is what I'm calling consciousness. Now, that's not, when you really pay attention to what that's like, it doesn't actually answer to the name I or me. I mean, it really is it's just this open space in which everything's appearing, including thoughts and intentions and desires and emotions. And there, it really is a cacophony, but the cacophony changes the more you fall back to this position of just witnessing the show, right? And so, it's like I guess, I mean, one analogy that's actually fairly apropos is like the difference between dreaming and lucid dreaming, right? The more you lucid dream, the more you actually can kind of change your dreams. I mean, that's what it is.
To a point.
Yeah, but but you're still, there's a consequence to being lucid, and being perpetually lost in thought, being identified,
but not noticing
thought as thought, being identified with every intention that surfaces in the mind is really deeply analogous to being asleep and dreaming and not knowing you're dreaming. Right? Well, you're in a situation you're not recognizing.
Well, it's interesting because sometimes I can't actually use the information. So, for example, when you went into the "Don't we want the best and brightest" thing, right. I thought, oh my God, Sam is going to drag me there, and that way he's going to be the guy who believes. Well, no, because there is no thing called xenophilic restrictionism, which is what most of us are. Certainly, I am in my belief structure, and the idea that every single news organ is ready to call any restrictionist a xenophobe. I'm thinking, oh my God, Sam is dragging me to this place. He doesn't even know it. No, and I'm starting to get angry and agitated and excited. And there was nothing I could do to actually, I couldn't find any control knob. Right.
But so I mean, to come back to Earth, where, something more concrete than pure consciousness, I'm aware of the potential hypocrisy in judging people. Like, so like to take, I just kind of shit all over Nassim Taleb, right? I am totally, so I don't believe in free will. Yeah. I know he didn't invent himself. Like there's a place in which I'm totally non-judgmental of him. And he can't do otherwise, right? He's just being the perfect version of Nassim Taleb, as is Donald Trump, right? Like that's just it. And in Trump's case, the thing that I'm judgmental of, I'm not especially judgmental of him. I mean, he seems like a malfunctioning robot to me, right? He's just what I'm judgmental of is the larger situation of all of this happening, and half the population seem to be pretending that there's something optimal about it, right? That's like that's so terrifyingly risky to me that I think it's appropriate to be in touch with the outrage module rather than the non-judgmental, nobody created themselves module. And but I pick and choose my moments of outrage, and I get off the ride as soon as there's no longer, as soon as I notice there's no reason to be on it.
That it's no longer adaptive.
Yeah. So it's like, how much time am I going to, so now like in my use of social media, like I'll get on Twitter, I'll see something outrageous, I'll get triggered by it, but I mean, I'll get off 30 seconds later and it's over, right? Whereas if I were to do the thing that entangled me, it could take up much more of my life.